All right, so let's bring up the screen here. So let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of the Headroom Intel platform and what the different components are, and then we can go into them in detail. So you've got your ISO selector here. Right now in my demo environment, I've got ERCOT, ISO New England, and PJM. And then you can pick the zones based upon the different ISOs chosen. And then you've got across the top, you've got Intel, Matrix, Price to Compare, and Dashboard. So the Intel is an AI-based component that we understand and look at every single day when the matrices are published, that we calculate ourselves, and looking at the characteristics between the matrices and the sales channels and the prices to compare and so forth. What are the different things that we're identifying that as patterns or as actions that need to be taken by our customers? So this is a dynamic thing that gets created every single day that has the signals and the intel brought to their attention, as well as a market brief. Then there's the matrix, which is literally a price matrix, and we'll go into that in further detail. Extremely facile and easy to use, very, very powerful. Then we've got our prices to compare screen. Now, obviously in ERCOT, there is no default utility, so that doesn't have a price to compare, but we'll discuss that in the other markets. And then dashboards. There's different kinds of dashboards that give you an at-a-glance view of what's going on in your market. So back to the Intel and back to ERCOT, right? So in this case, I'm looking at ERCOT in all zones. I'm looking at residential. I can look at residential or commercial. And immediately I get an AI brief. In this particular case, there's not a whole lot going on in ERCOT at a macro level, so it's a fairly generic brief. I'll show you that in the other markets. We've got some signals in here, like for example, we've seen that in AEP that TNC residential is a very good place for retention for us. And we can see how our different channels are doing. Our best is at almost 100% retention, and our worst is at 86% retention. So this signal is just telling me, hey, listen, this is a place where I should continue to sell, because it's strong for us. And you can see the different markets and the different drill downs here. But in this one, for example, inside sales has a 95.8% retention rate, but online is only 23%. So I should probably spend more time on some of these other signals. These other channels up here. So this is the sort of the anatomy of signals and intel. You've got a breakdown. You've got the description. You've got the formula. You've got some informative graphs, and then you can actually see what's going on in here and explanations of what the signal measures and why did this particular signal fire. And then, of course, you also have a breakdown on the Intel side, an overall look at the entire market, and it can tell you what's going on. You can look at that from each individual market. There's a bunch of different signals that can trigger. What's great about the signal and Intel system that we've got is that when we talk to our clients and understand what are the kinds of things that a human would normally look for, what does a trained eye look for in that market, we can drive those things to be automatically driven signals and intel, so that it brings it directly to your attention. Instead of having to filter through information, it gives that level of focus. So in this particular case, we see, okay, we've got an early drop surge in Wamiko residential. An early drop would be early churn before the contract end date. So in this particular case, our call center enrolled 49 people and we had 26 early drops. So it gives you an indicator, hey, something might be going wrong with the pitch. Something might be going wrong. People might be getting overpromised. Maybe the script is wrong. What's going on in this area with this call center, and how do we help? So it gives you a very early look. Brian, you've been instrumental in creating these signals and intel. So I don't know if you want to describe a little bit in the behind the scenes of how the sausage works, and sort of what layers of computation that we have going on here.
Yeah, sure. So the signals use like a threshold evaluation technique. So essentially, we set a date to say, okay, at 6 months indicates that it's an early drop, right? And it's easily configurable to say, oh, we really want 4 months to say that this indicates that this is an early drop, and how many of them over a certain period of time actually indicate that yes, I would like to see this as a signal. So those thresholds are adjustable, so you can see the signals come through, and if you start seeing signals, oh, this, I really only care once over 30% of them show an early drop sign versus 10% of them, because that's too early of a signal to tell. You can adjust that, so the system kind of learns with you, and it sees what you see. So the nice thing is about AI in general is that it's trained on human language and interactions. So it really does have a good way of displaying you this information in a way that a human would understand. So we can change those things, and the signals also roll up into Intel, right? So if you have two signals that both, right? So there's an early drop in two different areas, but they're both on the same channel. Oh, hey, this channel might, like Mike said, might be having an issue with the script, with the direction that it's going in. So that's the overall sentiment of signals in Intel. And like I said before, you're going from a system of record to a system of action, and that action in this case is, hey, you need to do something about this channel because there's signs that that's dropping off. So that's long and short of it, right?
Great point. And you can see in the signal and Intel that what you can do with these signals in Intel is you can take an Intel and combine multiple signals, right? So we've got what's going on here. We've got a trend reversal in PJM residential because we see that the headroom is dropping in several different signals, right? So you've seen headroom below critical 4 different times, 4 different signals fired to say, hey, listen, there's something larger going on in our residential book in PGM as an example. Okay, so you can come up with some very creative combos, and the system will also learn what some of those combos should be going forward and recommend them to you. So taking this and bringing it directly to your attention right away. So this is the PJM version. Again, you've got signals and Intel and residential and commercial, and you can drill it down to individual markets and things like that to see different views of what's going on. Very powerful system. Now, on top of that, you can take a look at there are some AI generated prompts here that you can actually click on them, and it will actually pop open a side window and actually give you an analysis. So if you say, okay, if you click on, which territories should I exit, it'll go look at that in the particular market that you've put in, and it'll tell you, what's going on and with a real AI chatbot integration with all of your data, limited to your data, so that it's very, very specific. And you can also put in typed messages as well to ask specific questions. So that's our Intel signal and Intel dashboard, plotter, right? Now let's get into the price matrix. This is really, really cool. It has, if you opt in for this, it has the ability to overlay price to compare right on top of your matrix. So you can see all of your rate codes, all of your terms, all of your states and zones or whatever. So let's say if I just wanted to pick Pennsylvania, and then I want to pick PICO, and then I want to pick a particular rate code. Now all of a sudden it starts filtering this down, right? And you can see that you can start filtering out different terms. So now I'm doing a 6-month, an 18-month, and a 36-month, right? In this particular instance, all 3 of my rates happen to be above the price to compare, right? So I'm about 9 mils above the price to compare in this particular thing. But it will tell you also what the sweet spot term is, right? So the sweet spot term is going to be 6 months, right? And then and then you can pick a start month. So let's say I wanted to say, okay, chart this out. This is what my start month for June, starting in June 2026, for rate code R112 in PJM PICO. right? So it's extremely quick to be able to come up with exactly what you see. Once you've got that, you can hit generate quote, and it'll actually create a formatted PDF that you can format for the customer that you've got in mind. And you can download that PDF, and we can put your own brand on it as a supplier. Instantaneous rack rate pricing, right? But and you can see across the board, these little red arrows mean that I'm above the price to compare. I'll show you in another market where that would be different. So you can clear this and literally go back to your full matrix here. So this is when you hit select all on terms and clear on states and utilities, you get the entire view, and it's very easy to peg it down to a particular rate code. Very, very quick. And then you can also hit export. Anything that you filtered on the screen, you hit export. It'll spit out a CSV for you in that format as well for whatever other things you want to do. You can, with our matrix calculations, our supplier margins are built in. But if you want to add in salesperson margin, every number on the screen gets this margin built in. So if I add 5 mils, it literally adds 5 mils everywhere. Very, very simple, quick and easy to maintain. So again, it gives you your sweet spots, it gives you your rate codes, and it allows you to add margin as a salesperson. Brian, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this page.
No, I mean that covers it pretty well, right? I like to look at it as an Excel based price matrix on steroids, right? Has way more functionality, easy, really great fluid UI. A lot of thought was put into the UI behind this, given to people who use the manual version for years and understand it and go, hey, it'd be great if you could only do this and pick one and have it automatically generate a quote. Yep, that's in there. So it's I think that's pretty important. But also, as Mike's doing this now, the AI component works on all the screens, across all the different screens, and trained on your data. It's super important. That's one of the things that it makes a differentiator in this product.
Sorry, I made a typo in here. My best start month for G1 rate code. All right, and we'll close that off, and you'll see in the background the AI little bot up here is thinking. So when he's done, boom, the results are here. Okay, so it says I'll fetch the pricing. Short-term start in May for the absolute lowest rate. Medium-term 2 to 8 months start in April. Long-term start in February or March. So you can really come up with some complex, fun interactions with this, and in the background it'll do that work very rapidly for you. One of my favorites was I did one where I said, hey, I've got a pizza place and I gave it 3 different utilities and zones, and I said, what's the best blended rate, right? What's the best combo that I can give this customer across the board? And it went through all the matrices and figured everything out and just brought it right to me. So I can make a deal in the background right away without having to go searching even through this easy to use UI. As you can see, it's extremely responsive and handles all markets, handles ERCOT, handles PJM, ISO New England, and whatever ISOs you have matrices for. We can accommodate bring your own matrix. So if you have your own calculations that you'd like to put in, we can do that. Take a little bit of wiring on the back end, but not terrible. So now, next thing in the anatomy is going to be price to compare. Now this is a really, really, really cool thing. We can look at this in either a grid format or a map. I'll start on the grid. Again, I'll go to PJM because it's got the most data. But if you look at the service territories here, it will tell you your average headroom by utility from best to worst. So in Duquesne, I've got, my average is 22.4, but you can see I've got 1 rate code that's really strong and then 9 that are favorable. In some markets, like down here in ComEd, I've got 1 that's strong, 2 that are favorable, 5 that are slightly cautionary, meaning they are near but slightly below the price to compare. And then we've got ones that are avoid because they're negative. So if I click on these, you can see, boom, that entire breakdown. So you can see which are positive, which are men's amends, and which ones are not so good all the way down the line on every single utility. Then up here, by the combo of utility and rate code, this is pretty simple. Sell here, don't sell here. Sell here, don't sell here. Right? In the grid, very simple. You can see WPP rate code 30 has a negative 61% price to compare. Probably not something that's going to be terribly competitive. Probably not a place where I should spend time putting my my sales team. Again, I've got 5 mils margin. If I take out the margin, the numbers change. They get slightly better, right? Because I don't have that 5 mils in there. But that's but you've still got the supplier margin built in. So depending on whether or not it's an external channel that wants to add margin or not, you can put that in, and we can bake in whatever costs you want into your matrix prior to it hitting the screen. Again, residential and commercial, sell, don't sell, and then you can get into a map, which is pretty cool, which you start seeing where you compete on the map, right? So in here, ComEd, I'm favorable. Why am I favorable? Because I've got a few rate codes that are below the price to compare with reasonable margins. I should be pretty good there. But whereas over here in FE Ohio, all of my rate codes are negative with regard to price to compare. Now, obviously, that's not going to stop you from trying to sell, but it gives you a very clear idea of how you are doing competitively across the region. And your best opportunities are right here. In this case, Rockland's very strong for me. So that's someplace that I should direct more of my sales efforts. So again, you've got the map view, you've got the grid view, and you've got the same thing in ISO New England, map view, grid view. We don't have the same thing in Texas, but we can if we're thinking about starting to add competitive rates against other suppliers. But right now, this is purely price to compare. So I've got, WCMA in Massachusetts, and I've got my rate codes. Very, very quick and easy comparative where you should sell and how you should sell.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing too is just good to note that the map and the grid, it's essentially the same data in a different view, right? So when Mike said, "Oh, we should sell here," the way I look at that is, we should sell here. Where's here? And then you bring up that map, and it shows you exactly where that location is, where you can go, where you shouldn't go. And the other thing that this is really powerful for too is for your pricing desk, right? To be able to say, "Hey, I would like to be competitive here. Why are we not? There's a lot of potential here. We can, if we are able to adjust our price and work on some better forecasting calculations, so we can actually be competitive in this price here. This is a great opportunity. We're just not competitive here." So you can visually see that at a glance, which I think is really important at an organizational level from the top down, right? So you're going across different portions of your organization to say, there's potential here. We're leaving money on the table. If we can only fix our pricing, we'd be in really good shape here. Or, hey, there's nothing we can do about this in this location. Just keep our sales guys out of this location for right now. Let's steer them towards somewhere that's going to be much more productive for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that we've built this platform and we're progressing this across to become a unified pricing platform for custom pricing all the way up to large C&I, starting with rack rate, there will be other data sources added in. So for example, we talk about price to compare. This is the active price to compare right now, but we will be adding in as soon as we understand what the price to compare is going to be. So as soon as the utilities publish what the future price to compare is, it's like, hey, I'm not competitive here now, but I will be soon, right? And that's where signals and Intel come in. You'll get a signal saying, hey, price Headroom's getting ready to expand, coming next month. So if you can sell a future start date, you can get your customer in the money, right? Mm-hmm. So all kinds of different things to direct your sales teams. Very powerful tool, and more to come. And then finally, we get into our dashboards. You can look at things. You've got a switch and flow by utility, which will tell you exactly, how many starts and drops you've had on each individual day. Are you trending up or down in a particular region? You can look at that start and drop and net and the drop rate on every single utility in your footprint. Again, commercial and residential. So how are you doing? Are you doing well in both? Where should you be directing your activities? So, and this is really sort of a view of how are my sales efforts doing, right? So I decided I was going to really hit CMP hard. I made an investment there. How's my net? Am I growing? How am I doing? Right? Then from there, you've got a flow comparison, which is a week over week view, right? How did I do last week and how did I do this week? And you can see, okay, all right, so this week I've got 97 starts and 35 drops. Last week I had 163 starts and 83 drops. What's my net? How am I doing? It looks like this week I'm doing a little bit better because with fewer starts, my net is higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I still have more to gain to keep my momentum up in that particular territory. So really great at a glance view of how you're doing, again, residential and commercial. In this, my book as my demo user, I really don't have that much commercial activity going on in ISO New England. Whereas if I look at PJM, commercial, I've got I'm losing ground over here. What's going on? My commercial team's not really selling. I got to see what's going on there and check out my headroom, right? And then the final dashboard in our first rendition of Headroom Intel is churn velocity, right? In what utilities am I shrinking and what am I flat and where do I have an elevated churn rate, right? So this is still 4% at a 30-day churn velocity, 5% at a 90-day and a 4.2 12-month, but net over 90 days I am losing customers, right? And then in some other areas I'm stronger, right? So in ComEd, my churn rate's very low, my churn velocity very low, and I'm gaining customers, right? And then also that same gross churn by my sales channel. So hey, what's doing well for me, right? In this case, obviously these names are rather generic, broker and retail and so forth. But imagine these are your real channel names, and being able to see at a glance breakdown what are your sales efforts and where are your dollars better spent. So it's dollars better spent on channel, and it's dollars better spent on utility, and it's dollars better spent on location based upon price. So it all comes together into a true decision intelligence product that helps you at a glance know exactly how to run your retail business and where you can maximize your profitability.